The certified letter materialized on a Wednesday morning, tucked between a boutique coffee catalog and a fundraiser invitation I'd already mentally declined. Heavy ivory stationery, the type designed to intimidate before you've processed a single syllable. Magnolia Heights Community Association proclaimed the header in elaborate calligraphy. My partner Riley stood arranging orchids in a ceramic vase near our breakfast bar. Catching my expression, her grin radiated warmth. Another dispatch from the Rule Enforcement Brigade? I brandished the envelope dramatically, preparing myself for another lecture about approved paint swatches. Riley's laugh resembled distant bells. Please tell me you didn't use ivory instead of cream this time. Tearing it open, I anticipated the standard passive-aggressive commentary about landscaping standards. Instead, my brain struggled processing the bizarre combination. Legal proceedings, unapproved asset, ownership verification. They were challenging my ownership of my own vehicle. A sharp, involuntary laugh escaped. The absurdity transcended normal reality. Signed with theatrical flair by Margaret Stone, Association President, the document alleged my sapphire Rolls-Royce Phantom was an unlicensed commercial transport vehicle violating residential covenants. Furthermore, without any supporting documentation, it accused me of running an unauthorized luxury car service. The demand, immediate surrender of the vehicle for inspection, with a mandatory hearing to demonstrate legitimate ownership. Non-compliance threatened escalating penalties and potential property liens. Through the window, the Phantom sat gleaming. Less transportation, more kinetic sculpture. We'd purchased it celebrating multiple successful business ventures, marking the transition from survival mode to prosperity. It symbolized our journey together, our commitment to appreciating life's rewards. Now this stranger wanted to confiscate it. This defies belief, I said, passing Riley the document. She dried her hands, reading carefully. Her expression shifted from curiosity through disbelief toward controlled fury, the look reserved for witnessing injustice against those she protects. She's claiming we stole our own car? The words hung impossibly in the air. Essentially, I replied, attempting nonchalance. Apparently I'm operating some kind of executive transport service. Obviously a clerical error. 5 minutes on the phone should resolve everything. My confidence bordered on arrogance. Problems in my world followed logical patterns. Identify the malfunction, apply corrections, system resolves. This seemed like a minor bug in our suburban operating system requiring a simple patch. Magnolia Heights promised escape from complexity. 6 months prior, we'd sought tranquility. Space for a future dog, neighbors who acknowledged each other, existence where the most significant drama involved recycling schedules. The development was pristine, maintained grounds, mature maple trees, cultivated serenity. The idealized suburban dream, professionally packaged with substantial monthly assessments. Margaret Stone appointed herself guardian of this vision. I'd observed her once from distance, directing maintenance crews with military precision. A woman apparently fueled by grievances and an endless wardrobe of coral pantsuits. Rumors circulated among neighbors about her authoritarian governance, obsession with minor violations, vendettas against anyone questioning her authority. We'd maintained low profiles, paid our fees, valued our privacy. The strategy seemed sound. Don't provoke her, she won't provoke us. That assumption proved catastrophically wrong. Her brand of authoritarianism required no provocation, only targets. Our stunning electric vehicle had apparently painted one across our property. The subsequent hour involved navigating the association's labyrinthine phone system, seemingly designed to punish humanity. Eventually connecting with someone sounding simultaneously bored and antagonistic, I explained calmly, offering documentation, vehicle registration, purchase agreement, identification, whatever necessary. Her response, rehearsed monotone. All disputes require written submission. Ms. Stone handles legal matters exclusively. You'll receive hearing notification. Click. Staring at the disconnected phone, my initial confidence curdled into irritation. This wasn't malfunction. Malfunctions are accidental. This felt calculated, personal. I'd built my career engineering elegant solutions to complex problems. I refused defeat by a petty tyrant in business attire. New approach, I told Riley, now pacing our kitchen. Forget phones. Face-to-face conversation. Searching the association management office address produced unsettling results. Not a commercial facility, a residential address. Margaret Stone operated Magnolia Heights Community Association, including its financial accounts and legal proceedings, from her personal residence. The system wasn't just malfunctioned. The entire architecture was corrupted, written by her personally. My 5-minute fix was morphing into full-scale conflict, with the opening salvo fired directly at my doorstep. 2 days later, certified mail delivered round 2. The original lawsuit persisted, now accompanied by entirely fabricated additional violations. A $5,000 penalty for unauthorized driveway surface damage. Apparently, the Phantom's tires left marks on my own concrete. Another $10,000 for noise pollution, hilariously absurd given the vehicle's near-silent electric operation. My personal favorite, a $20,000 citation for operating unlicensed home-based commercial activity. Total damages, $35,000 plus the vehicle confiscation threat. Absurdity had evolved into predatory harassment. My pulse hammered as I contacted my attorney, Jessica, a sharp, direct professional who listened before whistling softly. Textbook power abuse case. She's gambling you'll be too intimidated to resist, expecting you'll simply pay to make it disappear. She miscalculated. I replied tightly. What's our strategy? Obviously we fight, but these situations drag out. Meanwhile, document everything meticulously, every communication, every interaction. Maintain detailed records. Avoid direct engagement. Riley and I attempted following that advice, tried maintaining normalcy despite the anxiety Margaret Stone had suspended over our home. She made it impossible. The following evening, while Riley and I relaxed on our patio with wine, 2 men in generic, ill-fitting security uniforms materialized at our property edge. No company identification, just enforcement printed on their shirts. They stood arms crossed, staring at our residence. Clear intimidation tactics, physical manifestation of Margaret's authority. I approached the property line.
Can I assist you?
The larger one, heavily built with a shaved head and neck tattoo, smirked. Just monitoring compliance with community standards. On my private property? I challenged. We're positioned on common area, he countered, indicating the roadside grass strip. We can remain here indefinitely. They stayed 3 hours, silent, menacing until well past dark. Unsettling. Riley visibly shaken, my simmering frustration boiling into cold determination. This woman wasn't merely filing paperwork. She was actively attempting to terrorize us within our own home. The breaking point arrived Saturday. Detailing the Phantom in my garage, a therapeutic ritual involving methodical cleaning and polishing, I had music playing softly. So focused, I didn't register the police cruiser until an officer walked up my driveway. He appeared young, uncomfortable, exhausted by whatever he was about to communicate. Sir, we received a disturbance report, he said, gesturing vaguely garageward. I silenced the music. A disturbance, officer? I'm cleaning my car. He sighed. The caller reported, and I'm relaying what she claimed, that you were laughing maniacally while revving a loud engine, possibly preparing for illegal street racing. I stared, processing the absurdity. The car is electric. It doesn't have an engine to rev. Let me guess, I continued. The caller was Ms. Margaret Stone? His expression confirmed everything. After verifying my identification and running the vehicle information, everything, obviously legitimate, he returned my documents with an apologetic look and withering glance toward Margaret's direction before departing. That crystallized everything. She'd weaponized law enforcement. She'd sent intimidation crews. She was manufacturing tens of thousands in fraudulent penalties for extortion. Attempting logical resolution had failed. My attorney's defensive strategy felt like victim mentality. I wasn't a victim. I was a strategist who protected family. That night, in my office surrounded by monitor glow, Riley appeared, placing a hand on my shoulder. What are you planning? She asked softly. I'm finished playing defense, I replied, meeting her eyes. This isn't a neighborhood anymore, it's a battlefield. And Margaret Stone has no comprehension of who she's challenging. I'd spent my career building secure, impenetrable systems, identifying weaknesses and exploiting them. I possessed resources and capabilities Margaret, in her coral pantsuit arrogance, couldn't possibly comprehend. She thought she was fighting someone who'd simply write a check. She was about to discover she'd engaged someone who would systematically dismantle her entire empire. The war for Magnolia Heights had commenced, and Margaret Stone was about to learn a severe lesson about underestimating opponents. This transcended the vehicle. This was about reclaiming our peace and delivering justice the association bylaws could never contain. The time for reacting had ended. Time to go offensive. The decision to counterattack wasn't impulsive rage. It was calculated strategy, formulated in my home office's quiet hum of technology. Margaret Stone imagined herself the dominant force in this manicured suburban ecosystem. But she was an amateur wielding intimidation and bluster. I preferred data and precision. My first call went to my longtime colleague and business partner, Marcus. Marcus is brilliant, someone who perceives reality through network architecture and algorithmic patterns. He can locate digital anomalies in massive data systems, and he approaches it with the enthusiasm of someone solving an intricate puzzle. When I outlined the situation, he didn't offer sympathy. Just one question: when do we begin? That evening, my home transformed from sanctuary into operations center. I wasn't merely going to observe Margaret. I was going to construct a comprehensive digital profile of her entire operation. This was my domain, my expertise. Time to work. First came the surveillance infrastructure. I owned a professional-grade commercial drone, a sophisticated device with a 12K camera and thermal imaging capabilities. Technically purchased for commercial property surveys, its applications were adaptable. I programmed a silent high-altitude surveillance pattern maintaining legal airspace over my property while providing perfect aerial perspective of Margaret's residence 2 streets over. From 500 feet elevation, her property became a detailed map of her activities. We could monitor every vehicle arrival and departure, every delivery, every late-night visitor. The drone became my unblinking aerial observer, streaming high-resolution data to secure servers in my basement. Next, I enhanced my home security system. Standard motion-activated cameras sufficed for package theft prevention, but I needed something more sophisticated. I installed high-gain directional microphones on my roof, camouflaged as satellite equipment, aimed not at her residence but at the public street fronting it, legally capturing ambient neighborhood sounds. The critical component was the thermal camera array mounted on my house's side, facing her property. It couldn't penetrate walls, obviously, but it could indicate how many individuals occupied the house, which rooms they inhabited, and their movement patterns, all based on subtle heat signatures they generated. Margaret had sent intimidation crews to watch me. I was observing her in ways she couldn't conceive. While I handled hardware, Marcus tackled software. He initiated a thorough examination of the association's public website. It was amateurish, a cheap template with broken links and low-quality images. But to Marcus, it was an entry point. Within hours, he'd identified numerous vulnerabilities, security gaps left by negligent developers years prior. He didn't exploit them immediately. Instead, he mapped the weaknesses, creating a digital blueprint of the entire system. Like a master safecracker listening to tumbler mechanisms fall, patient and methodical. It's incredibly sloppy, he reported through our encrypted communication link. She's operating the entire association's finances on an outdated laptop with obsolete operating systems and no firewall protection. It's not a fortress, it's a garden shed with a cheap padlock. The deeper we investigated, the clearer it became that Margaret's authority wasn't based on sophisticated control. It was based on nobody ever examining closely. She ruled through fear and apathy. Everyone was too intimidated or exhausted to challenge her. That was changing. Our first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Our neighborhood character, Leonard. Leonard was a retired accountant in his late 60s whose primary interests were conspiracy theories and meticulously documenting backyard bird migration patterns. He observed me launching the drone one afternoon and approached, eyes wide with suspicion. "Is that one of those government surveillance devices?" he asked, pointing shakily skyward. I decided partial truth was better than complicated deception. "Something like that, Leonard. Just monitoring neighborhood security." His eyes brightened. "Security? Excellent thinking. That Stone woman is completely out of control. Did you know she fined me $200 last month? Claimed my wind chimes constituted auditory pollution." "Auditory pollution? I've had those chimes for 20 years. He then delivered a 15-minute monologue detailing every petty grievance he and other neighbors had suffered under Margaret's governance. He was a walking archive of her abuses. He described an elderly widow fined for a garden statue 2 inches above regulation height, a young family threatened with litigation for installing a swing set that hadn't been pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee, which consisted solely of Margaret herself. He was a treasure trove of testimonial evidence, a chorus of discontent proving my case wasn't isolated. It was systematic. Armed with this perspective, Marcus and I intensified our investigation. We weren't just seeking evidence against Margaret anymore. We were pursuing justice for the entire community. The real revelation came from aerial surveillance. The drone's thermal camera detected something unusual. Every night around 2 a.m., a vehicle would enter Margaret's driveway and idle for exactly 15 minutes before departing. The thermal signature showed the driver never exited. A recurring clandestine meeting. The vehicle was a generic sedan impossible to identify from our altitude. But Marcus, using some digital enhancement, managed to capture a partial license plate number. He traced it through various databases he had access to. The vehicle was registered to a shell corporation, and that shell corporation's registered agent was someone named Michael Stone, Margaret's brother, a disgraced real estate developer with a history of questionable deals and failed ventures. Why was he meeting his sister in the middle of the night in her driveway? What were they so desperate to conceal? We had surveillance. We had testimonial evidence. We had a connection to a suspicious individual. We were unraveling the threads of Margaret's carefully constructed fabrication, and we could sense it beginning to collapse. The simple paperwork error had evolved into a comprehensive forensic investigation, and we were just beginning. We still didn't have the complete picture, but for the first time, we had a trail to follow, and it was leading us deep into the darkness at Magnolia Heights' core. The discovery of the late-night meetings with her brother Michael shifted our focus. This was no longer just about Margaret's petty authoritarianism. It was about her connections. Marcus and I directed our full attention to the digital trail left by Margaret and her brother. We treated the association's network like a crime scene. Every data byte was potential evidence. We accessed the cloud server where the association stored its official records, meeting minutes, financial statements, vendor contracts, everything. It was protected by a password that was, unbelievably, Magnolia 123. Marcus cracked it in under 30 seconds. We were inside. What we discovered was a masterclass in fraudulent accounting. Invoices for thousands of dollars paid to landscaping companies that didn't exist. Contracts for pool maintenance services with addresses leading to vacant lots. Money was flowing from the association's accounts into a web of shell corporations, all of which, after several layers of obfuscation, traced back to the same name, Michael Stone. Margaret wasn't just a power-hungry authoritarian. She was an embezzler, systematically draining community funds and channeling them directly to her brother. We spent days, fueled by coffee and growing righteous indignation, meticulously documenting every fraudulent transaction. We built a forensic audit that was airtight, cross-referencing fabricated invoices with bank transfers and corporate filings. The theft scale was staggering. Over 3 years, Margaret Stone had stolen nearly $500,000 from her neighbors, while simultaneously fining them for mailbox colors. We had ironclad evidence of financial fraud, enough to imprison her for years. But something still didn't align. It was substantial money, certainly, but the personal, vindictive nature of her attack on me seemed disconnected from simple greed. Why target me specifically over my vehicle? Why send intimidation crews? Embezzlement is a crime you commit in shadows. Her campaign against me was loud, public, aggressive. It drew attention, the last thing a criminal wants. The motive was still missing. The why remained mysterious. The answer we suspected lay in their communications. We needed to understand what she and her brother were discussing. Legally, we couldn't intercept phone calls, but my directional microphones on the roof offered another possibility. Aimed at the public street, they were powerful, capable of capturing stray signals, electronic noise, and fragments of wireless transmissions bleeding from nearby houses. It was a long shot, but Marcus believed he could write an algorithm to sift through the terabytes of ambient noise we were recording, searching for patterns matching wireless phone frequencies. He called it digital signal recovery. It was painstaking work. For 2 days, the servers processed data, analyzing audio static, filtering out passing vehicles, barking dogs, and Leonard's wind chimes. We got thousands of false positives. Baby monitor snippets, cordless landline calls, garage door openers. It seemed like a dead end. I was ready to abandon the audio approach and concentrate on the financial trail. We had enough to prosecute her already, but Marcus is persistent. The signal is there somewhere, he insisted, eyes fixed on a scrolling waveform on his screen. It's just buried under interference. He began applying increasingly complex filters, isolating specific frequency bands and running them through voice recognition software, tuned to snippets of Margaret's voice we'd captured from her yelling at maintenance workers. Then, on the third night, he found it. It wasn't a clear recording, it was faint, full of static, like a ghost on a malfunctioning radio station. But it was them. It was a phone call between Margaret and Michael Stone, intercepted by sheer luck as the signal bounced off a passing delivery vehicle. We leaned close to the speakers, volume maximized, straining to hear through the hiss. Michael's voice was slick and impatient. Is it handled? Is the tech guy getting the message? He's stubborn, Margaret's voice replied, tight with frustration. He's not capitulating like the others. He's asking questions. He retained an attorney. There was a pause. Then Michael's voice dropped, becoming colder, more threatening. Then you need to intensify pressure, Margaret. The investors are getting anxious. They want to see progress. We need that property. It's the only one with the correct zoning and the sightlines for the waterfront access. Without his land, the whole electric vehicle resort deal collapses. I felt the air evacuate my lungs. An electric vehicle resort. A luxury EV resort on my property. Suddenly, everything crystallized. The lawsuit over my electric car wasn't random. It was thematic. A sick inside joke. The fabricated fines, the harassment, the intimidation, all designed to accomplish one thing. Make my life so unbearable that I would sell my house cheaply and leave the neighborhood. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted my land, my home. The place Riley and I had chosen for our future was nothing more than a construction site to them. The $500,000 embezzlement wasn't the main event. It was just seed funding for their real project. Targeting me was step one. This wasn't a dispute. It was a calculated, high-stakes real estate conspiracy. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Margaret Stone was using the association's authority, an organization meant to protect property values, to steal my property itself. She wasn't just a corrupt bureaucrat. She was a predator who had marked our home as prey. The gloves didn't just come off. They were incinerated. My mission was no longer just about defending myself. It was about exposing a conspiracy so corrupt it threatened to consume the entire community. And I had just found the blueprint. The recording changed everything. The game had a new dimension, and the stakes were infinitely higher. I played the audio for Riley. She listened in silence, her expression hardening with each word. When it finished, she didn't speak for a long time. She just walked to the window and looked out at our yard, at the life we were building. An electric vehicle resort, she said, her voice barely audible. They want to demolish our home to build a charging station with wellness services. She turned back to me, and the fire in her eyes could have melted steel. So what's the plan? And don't tell me to be patient. We're past patient. I had the evidence, mountains of it. Financial records, surveillance footage, and now the definitive conversation. The question was no longer if we would act, but how. My first instinct was pure, unfiltered rage. I wanted to broadcast the recording across the internet, destroy Margaret's reputation completely, and watch her empire smolder from my front porch. It would be satisfying. It would be fast. But would it be justice? We sat in the living room late into the night, just Riley and me discussing it thoroughly. Marcus was on standby, ready to execute whatever strategy we chose. We could go to the police now, Riley suggested. We have proof of fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. And we will, I said. But consider this. The first time I contacted them, they were dismissive. They're dealing with serious crimes. A complicated association dispute with digital evidence could get buried in paperwork for months. Meanwhile, Margaret and her brother could destroy evidence, cover their tracks, or even escalate. I paced the floor, my mind processing possibilities. A purely legal approach felt too slow, too uncertain. It left power in the hands of a system that had already failed us once. A purely vengeful approach, a simple data release online, felt too chaotic. It would expose her, yes, but it wouldn't necessarily dismantle the corrupt structure she had built. It wouldn't protect our neighbors. It wouldn't guarantee that someone just like her couldn't take her place. This isn't just about us anymore, I said, finally stopping in front of Riley. She's been doing this for years. Think of Leonard and his wind chimes. Think of that woman with the garden statue. They've bullied dozens of people into submission. If we just eliminate Margaret, her system of fear remains. The board is either complicit or terrified. The neighbors are too scared to speak up. We can't just remove the head. We have to burn the whole structure. This was the moral crossroads. Was this about revenge or reform? Was my goal to punish one person or liberate an entire community? The question at the heart of this whole nightmare echoed in my mind. How far will a person go to defend their own? And the answer became crystal clear. All the way. Not just to protect their house and their partner, but to protect the very concept of home. Of a community where people feel safe. And justice is more than just words in legal documents. My skills gave me the power to do more than just win a personal battle. They gave me the power to be a catalyst for change. It was a responsibility I couldn't ignore. Okay, Riley said, her voice firm. No half measures. We expose everything, not just to the police, but to the whole neighborhood. We give them the truth and let them be the jury. And just like that, the plan was born. It wouldn't be a quiet takedown. It would be a public reckoning, a revolution. The annual association meeting was in 1 week. It was Margaret's favorite event, her yearly coronation, where she would stand before the residents, report on her accomplishments, and condescendingly remind them of the rules. This year, the meeting would have a different agenda. It would be her trial. We would turn her stage into a witness stand. We would use her own meeting, her own platform against her. The plan was audacious and risky. We would need to be flawless in execution. For the next week, our house was a hive of activity. Marcus built a self-contained presentation package, a digital payload loaded with all our evidence. The forged invoices, the bank statements, the drone footage of her brother's late-night visits, and the damning audio recording, all encrypted and loaded onto a secure drive, ready to be connected to the meeting room's projection system. I reached out to neighbor Leonard. I didn't reveal everything, just that I had discovered some financial irregularities and planned to present them at the meeting. His reaction was electric. He immediately started making calls, rallying the other disgruntled residents, the victims of Margaret's petty fines and power trips. He became our community organizer, spreading the word that this year's meeting was one you didn't want to miss. A quiet rebellion was brewing. A groundswell of discontent ready to boil over. The night before the meeting, Margaret made one last desperate move. Her 2 enforcement personnel showed up again, this time banging on our front door, shouting that we were violating a new rule about unauthorized exterior lighting, because our porch light was apparently the wrong color temperature. It was pathetic. A final clumsy attempt at intimidation. I didn't even open the door. I just activated the sprinkler system, not the lawn sprinklers, but the high-pressure targeted sprinklers I had installed around the driveway for precisely such an occasion. A sudden, powerful jet of water shot out from the landscaping, drenching both men from head to toe. They slipped and fell on the wet concrete, sputtering and cursing as they scrambled back to their vehicle. Completely humiliated, I watched them on the security monitor, a small, satisfying smile playing on my lips. It was a petty victory, but it was a sign of things to come. The tide was turning. The trap was set. All the pieces were in place for the final act. Tomorrow at the Magnolia Heights Community Center, the show would begin. And Margaret Stone had no idea she was the star. The day of the annual meeting arrived, gray and overcast, as if the atmosphere itself sensed a storm approaching. I put on a crisp suit, not for Margaret, but for myself. It felt like armor. Riley gave me a quick kiss at the door. "Show them what justice looks like," she said, her eyes shining with pride and nervous excitement. Marcus was already positioned down the street from the community center, operating our mobile command station from his laptop. He had remote access to the center's Wi-Fi and was ready to initiate the live stream on my signal. As I entered the meeting room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. About 50 neighbors were there, more than double the usual attendance. They sat in rigid plastic chairs, their faces a mixture of fear, resentment, and a flicker of hope. Leonard gave me a subtle nod from the front row. At the head of the room, behind a long folding table, sat Margaret Stone. She was in her element, wearing a power red blazer and an expression of smug authority. She beamed at the large crowd, completely misreading the room. She thought it was a testament to her leadership. She had no idea it was an execution chamber. She started the meeting with her usual self-congratulatory speech, droning on about property values and successful enforcement of aesthetic standards. I let her talk. I let her construct her own scaffold with every condescending word. She was the picture of confidence. Oblivious to the fact that her entire world was about to detonate, she finally opened the floor to questions from the residents, a formality she usually rushed through. "Yes, Mr. Henderson," she said, pointing at me with a perfectly manicured finger, a predator smiling at perceived prey. "I trust you're here to discuss the outstanding liens on your property." "Actually, no," I said, standing and walking calmly toward the front of the room. "I'm here to give a presentation." I held up the secure drive. "I have some information about the association's finances that I think everyone here will find enlightening." A murmur went through the crowd. Margaret's smile faltered. "All presentations must be pre-approved by the board," she snapped. "That's not on the agenda." "Then let's amend the agenda," a voice called out from the back. It was Leonard. Another neighbor shouted, "Yeah, let's hear what he has to say." Suddenly, the room was filled with voices of support. The dam of fear had broken, cornered, and with her authority crumbling before her eyes, Margaret had no choice. "Fine," she hissed through gritted teeth, "but make it quick." I walked to the podium, connected the drive to the laptop linked to the projector, and took a deep breath. "Marcus, we're live," I whispered into my watch. In Marcus's vehicle, a single keystroke sent a live video feed of the meeting to a private streaming link, which was simultaneously distributed to every single resident of Magnolia Heights. Local news outlets and the state attorney general's office. The show had begun. The first image that appeared on the huge screen behind Margaret was a copy of the $10,000 fine she'd given me for noise pollution. Next to it, I played a video of the Phantom gliding silently from my driveway. The only sound was birdsong. The room was silent. Then, one by one, the forged invoices appeared on the screen. Landscaping by a company whose address was a postal box in another state. Pool services from a business that had been defunct for 5 years. Each invoice was followed by the corresponding bank statement showing a transfer to a shell corporation. And on the final slide of the section, a complex flowchart showed every single one of those corporations leading to one individual, her brother Michael Stone. Gasps rippled through the audience. People were pulling out their phones, capturing their neighbors' reactions, realizing the scope of the betrayal. Margaret's face had gone from red to a sickly, ashen white. But I was just getting started. I displayed the drone footage, the grainy, high-altitude video of the sedan pulling into her driveway night after night. I showed them the partial license plate and the registration tracing it back to her brother. The murmurs grew louder, angrier. People were standing, pointing at the screen. Then at Margaret, her 2 enforcement personnel who had been stationed by the door, trying to look intimidating, were now exchanging glances, then looking at the increasingly hostile crowd. They saw the writing on the wall. They weren't security. They were paid actors in a production that was reaching its catastrophic finale. Without a word, they quietly slipped out the back door, abandoning their queen. And then, for the grand finale, I played the audio, the tiny static-filled recording of her phone call. Her voice filled with contempt, filling the room. "He's stubborn," not capitulating like the others. And then her brother's voice, cold and clear. "We need that property. Without his land, the whole electric vehicle resort deal collapses." It was like a bomb had detonated. The room erupted. It was no longer a meeting. It was an uprising. People were on their feet, shouting, demanding answers, calling her a thief, a liar, a criminal. Leonard was leading the charge, waving a copy of his wind chime fine like a battle flag. Margaret just sat there, frozen, her face a mask of pure, absolute shock. She had been so insulated by her own power, so certain of her control, that the concept of being held accountable had never even registered. She looked small, pathetic, a tyrant without an army. But just as I was about to signal Marcus to end the feed and let the crowd have its reckoning, my watch buzzed. It was a message from Marcus. It contained just one sentence, but it was a sentence that made my blood run cold. "You need to see this." I found one more file. It's worse. Much worse. The show wasn't over. There was one last twist, one final horrifying layer to this conspiracy that was about to be peeled back. And I had a sickening feeling that this last revelation was going to be the one that brought the whole house of cards down. Not just on Margaret, but on something much, much bigger. The message from Marcus buzzed on my wrist again. More urgent this time. Check your inbox immediately. The room was still in chaos, a sea of angry faces, all directed at the paralyzed figure of Margaret Stone. I held up a hand, and to my surprise the noise subsided slightly. They were looking to me now. I had become the leader of this impromptu revolution. I subtly glanced at my phone. Marcus had sent me a single file, a scanned PDF document. The title at the top read, Geotechnical Soil Analysis Report 124 Willow Lane. My address. My heart pounded against my ribs. I opened the file. It was a formal, official-looking report, filled with geological terminology, soil density charts, and moisture content tables. It looked completely legitimate. The summary on the final page was stark and terrifying. It concluded that the substrate on my property was critically unstable, due to an undocumented subterranean water source. It recommended the existing structure be condemned and demolished for safety reasons. The report was dated 3 weeks from now. It was a ghost from the future, a document Margaret was planning to use as her final move, after she'd driven me out. It was her checkmate, forged, of course. But that wasn't the twist. The twist was at the bottom of the page. The report was stamped and signed. The signature belonged to Dr. Alexander Finch, a respected geologist, but the official seal pressed into the paper, the one that gave the document its undeniable authority, wasn't from a private firm. It was the seal of the Magnolia Heights City Planning Commission and the name of the commissioner who had apparently reviewed and co-signed this fraudulent report. The individual who was about to sign the death warrant for my home was a name I recognized from Marcus's earlier research into Michael Stone's business dealings. Commissioner Thompson. He wasn't just a corrupt city official. He was listed as a silent partner in the holding company for the electric vehicle resort project. This wasn't just an association matter anymore. This wasn't just embezzlement or a real estate scam. This was a criminal conspiracy that reached into our local government. Margaret wasn't just a queen in her tiny kingdom. She was a pawn in a much larger, more dangerous game. She had powerful allies, people who could make a house, and maybe even a person, disappear with the stroke of a pen. A cold dread washed over me, followed by a surge of pure adrenaline. This changed the stakes completely. We weren't just exposing a crooked association president. We were taking on a corrupt city official with the power to retaliate in ways we couldn't even imagine. I had a choice to make right there in front of everyone. I could stick to the original plan, let Margaret take the fall, and hope the rest stayed buried. It was the safe move, or I could go all in. I could pull this final rotten root out into the light, no matter how deep it went or what it was connected to. I looked over at Margaret. The shock had worn off, replaced by a flicker of something else in her eyes, arrogance. A tiny defiant smirk played on her lips. She thought she was still protected. She thought she had an ace in the hole. She thought her connection to Commissioner Thompson made her untouchable. She had no idea I was holding her final, desperate play in the palm of my hand. I made my decision. There would be no half measures. "One last thing," I said, my voice cutting through the remaining noise in the room. I transferred the PDF from my phone to the laptop. The forged geological report flashed onto the screen, massive and undeniable. I zoomed in on the conclusion, the recommendation to condemn my home. A fresh wave of shocked silence washed over the room. Then I zoomed in on the signatures, on Commissioner Thompson's name, on the official seal of the City Planning Commission. "This," I said, my voice ringing with cold fury, "is what was going to happen to my family's home next month. This is a forged geological survey co-signed by a city official who is a silent partner in the very project they wanted to build on my land." I let that sink in. I could see the understanding dawning on people's faces. This was bigger than lawn maintenance fees. This was about the fundamental corruption of the systems they trusted to protect them. This was about their homes, their safety, their community. That was the moment the uprising became a full-blown revolution. The anger in the room transformed from a chaotic roar into a focused, unified force. People weren't just yelling at Margaret anymore. They were pulling out their phones, but this time they weren't just recording. They were calling the mayor's office, calling the district attorney, calling the investigative reporters at the local news station, whose link Marcus had so thoughtfully provided. The digital firestorm we had started was about to become a real-world inferno. The trap I had set for Margaret Stone had just caught a much bigger fish, and the